the 60th Annual ISNA Convention. 60 years of service, navigating the way forward.
A few brave pioneering individuals had a vision.
From tiny seeds, large trees grow. With small steps, long journeys begin. With the dedication and service of a few.
Those giants were at the heart of everything.
Nothing could have been the way it was without them.
But how could anyone explain them after they were gone?
We should be thankful and grateful to Allah for the pioneers who established ISNA and who took care of ISNA activity.
It is always more important to have great sacrificing people starting a unique thing for the Ummah.
Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward the pioneer, like Dr. Uthman Ahmed and the others, who made it possible for us to have an organization like ISNA.
Congratulations to ISNA. I wish the continuous success for ISNA and for the member of ISNA.
What an emotional and proud moment for all of us, where people like me are benefiting from the sacrifices and the efforts that were made by people like Brother Uthman Ahmed.
We want to say thank you. Thank you for your service and your sacrifice. The seed you planted 60 years ago continues to provide services to our community to this day.
It is our collective responsibility to ensure that that tree continues to grow, that its fruit continue to be harvested.
"60 years of service, navigating the way forward."
Welcome. Thank you all for joining us this evening in a night of what we hope to consider a night of interfaith harmony, togetherness, and a reminder of what it means to be together in this way. So we're really happy that all of you have gathered here together. This year marks 60 years since the foundation of one of the premier Muslim organizations in North America, the Islamic Society of North America. Islamic Society of North America was founded upon the hope for the betterment of the Muslim community, but was also thought of being integral to building better relations with our neighbors, our communities, and helping foster a civically engaged generation of Muslims that wanted the best both for the Muslim community and the shared interests we have in the betterment of this nation that we all call home. 60 years also marks the year in which the great civil rights leader Malcolm X transitioned to an Orthodox Islam. While he made this transition, he also transitioned to a more ecumenical position in his interaction with the community, bridge building, and coalition work. Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, as he was known thereafter, wrote these words from Mecca. During the past 11 days here in the Muslim world, I have eaten from the same plate, drunk from the same glass, and slept on the same rug, while praying to the same God with fellow Muslims, whose eyes were the bluest of blue, whose hair was the blondest of blonde, and whose skin was the whitest of white. And in the words and in deeds of the white Muslims, I felt the same sincerity that I felt among the black African Muslims of Nigeria, Sudan, and Ghana. This transition marked what I consider a convergence of positions for the true great civil rights leaders, Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It provided a pathway forward for how different faith communities can live together, can cherish each other, and perhaps contribute together in realizing the most perfect union that we hope will someday be America. Along with Malcolm X, so made the transition Muhammad Ali, formerly known as Cassius Clay, the people's champ, and a beloved of this nation. Everyone loves Ali. Ali represents for me the best of what an interaction between a Muslim man and mainstream America can be. For not only was he the greatest, he was conscientious, humble, and a contributor to the best of what this nation stands for. Ali was deep, he was thoughtful, he was critical, and most importantly, he was searching for a little something that all great leaders of the civil rights era were searching for, something of what it truly means to be American. What does it mean to uphold the words of the Declaration of Independence, that all men and women were indeed created equal? Therefore, in their marching together, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, and others is an emblem of what it means to truly love for another what you love for yourself. So we thank you for gathering here today with us. In this exploration of interfaith understanding, community, and harmony, and perhaps in an ode to King's last book, where do we go from here? I hope that in us coming together, gathering in this way, we are moving towards realizing a little bit more of that promissory note, a little bit more of that perfect union. I leave you now with the words of Ali to begin this program and evening in a poem which he entitled The Truth. The breast of truth stands forward. The gaze of truth is straight. Truth has neither fear nor doubt. Truth has patience to wait. The words of truth are touching. The soul of truth is flaming. The heart of truth is warm. The mind of truth is clear and firm through rain or storm. Facts are but as shadows. Truth stands above all sin. Great be the battle in life. Truth in the end shall win. Life of truth is eternal. Immortal is its past. Power of truth will endure. Truth shall hold to the last. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to bring up Sister Tahira Ahmad, who will begin this program with a recitation from the Holy Quran. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Greetings of peace to all of our brothers and sisters who are joining us here today. I will be opening our beautiful gathering today with the recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha, which is the opening chapter of the Quran. Muslims recite the Quran in times of joy, but also in times of difficulty and struggle and all types of anxieties that are within us, and the Quran means that which is to be recited. It is meant to be recited in times of joy or in times of hardship. We will gather here to take a moment of pause. You will hear pauses in the recitation, and those pauses are meant to be there. Those pauses are meant to be a moment of silence, a moment of stillness, a moment of meditation together. Following Surah Al-Fatiha, I will recite from chapter 49, verse number 13. The meaning of Surah Al-Fatiha has many different interpretations. The one I will share with you today is the one that has been translated by one of my teachers. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. Praise be to the one who cares for the multiverse, the one who is in charge and the owner of the day in which all different paths of life will have its consequential meaning. Indeed, we worship you, and indeed, we ask only for your assistance and guidance. Guide us to the straight path, the path of those whom have been graced by you, and not the path of those who have been led astray. Surah Hujurat, verse number 13. O people, we have created you from the masculine and the feminine, and made you into nations and tribes so that you may get to know one another. Indeed, the most righteous of you in the sight of God are those who are most conscientious of him. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير صدق الله العظيم. Verily God has spoken truth. Amen.
Thank you, Tahira. Chaplain Tahira. Tahira is the chaplain of Northwestern University and one of the female Muslim chaplains in our community. So really, really glad she could make it out today. Next, I would like to bring up Brother Safa Zarzour, who is the president of the Islamic Society of North America, to give our welcome address for the evening. Thank you.
Good evening, Assalamu alaikum, and peace be with all of you. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to share with us the 60th anniversary and the 60th convention of the Islamic Society of North America. This is the longest running convention in the Muslim community in North America, and we hope and pray that it's only the first 60 years and that there are many, many 60 years to come. I'm thankful to have so many friends here, brothers and sisters that I've known over the years that have been partners for ISNA. We welcome you and we thank you for being here with us. You know, in 2005, I remember it like yesterday, I was on a panel discussion at the Medill School of Journalism, where our sister Tahira Ahmed is the chaplain today. And we had a panel about religion and the media that was put together by Medill School of Journalism. And on the panel, I had the privilege of being along several luminaries, leaders in various religious communities, Muslim, Catholic, Protestant. And we were asked questions and answers after we did a brief presentation. And a question was directed at me that had a bit of a tone, it was only 4 years from 9/11, and we still were going through that period. Can we trust them, those Muslims? Do we have to look for, behind every organization and what they are made of and who they are and all that? So I was asked the question, believe it or not, I do not remember the question. I do remember Cardinal George, who passed since. I asked, God's mercy upon him. He turned to me and said, you don't have to answer that. And then he turned around and said, we Catholics, 120 years ago, were being asked those very same questions. People questioning our integrity, our faithfulness to America, whether we are part of a papal conspiracy. And I'm paraphrasing, by the way, but those were the words that stayed with me and the kind of feelings that stayed with me. And then he said, I really think today it behooves us as a religious community, instead of questioning each other, is to realize that we live in a society that is increasingly godless, increasingly secular, that is attacking every religion, and that if we don't pay attention to that and keep on impugning each other, that all of us going to lose. I thanked him afterward. He reminded me when he was saying that with the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ about a society, any given society being like a ship, and where people, some of them will take the upper deck and some the lower deck, and the Prophet says that the people who are in the lower deck kept getting tired of getting up to fetch the water. And at the same time, they said among each other, we don't want to bother the people who are on the upper deck. The Prophet ﷺ says that, so they decided that it would be better for them to dig a hole in the bottom of the ship so they can get the water directly. The Prophet ﷺ says that if the people upstairs said, well, that's their part of the ship, and it's up to them they want to do, what do they want to do in their part, they will all drown. And if they are to prevent them, then everybody will survive. I submit to you that this is where we are today. We are at a place in our world, I don't say in our society, I don't say in our United States of America, in our world, where we need to realize that people who have faith in God, however and wherever the sources of their faith is, and wherever they are in their station of journey to God, need to come together and need to work together for the common good and to make sure that the ills of society doesn't drown all of us. And us saying, well, that's their problem, not ours, doesn't drown all of us. That's where we are at. And alhamdulillah, I can tell you that ISNA, who now is celebrating 60 years, was a pioneer in interfaith dialogues within the Muslim community. I make no secret, and I do know also, because my dear friends in the Jewish and the Christian community, both Catholic and Protestant, have related to me many times on local levels when we want to have a dialogue or something, them having to have difficult conversations within their congregation with people saying, why are we talking to them Muslims? And I'll be honest with you, we had people within the Muslim community saying, you start talking to people of other faiths and you start exposing our children and our youth to that, and they lose their faith. We already live in a society where we are a minority and where our religion is not welcomed, and you are doing something wrong that you're going to regret. And ISNA leaders, and in their drawing on the true teachings of Islam and their understanding of Islam, understood that if anything, interfaith dialogue is the way forward. Interfaith dialogue is what is going to be helpful to all of us and is going to make a better America. And so we went forward with that, and we had the difficult conversations, and we put up with the impugning from within our community about what are you doing, and you are selling out, or whatever other statements that were made. And we have never looked behind. And we never regretted that decision because we know it's grounded in our faith. We do know that. And I would say that we are at a critical point where I feel that we as religious communities have had enough time now to know each other, to appreciate each other, to ask the difficult questions of each other about the things that we kind of see difficult in the other faith. And we have started experimenting with looking at social ills and other things that plagues all of us and plagues our society at large to work on. I would submit to you, and I would invite all of us to make this 60-year anniversary a starting of a new era where people of faith in America, and the Islamic Society of North America is committed to that, will start thoughtfully having discussions that go beyond just feeling good about each other and go into the heart of some of the most difficult problems that are facing us as a society, work on them so we can, all of us continue to be marching towards a more perfect union. Thank you so much. I welcome you again. Assalamu alaikum.
I would next, thank you, Brother Safa, for those beautiful remarks on the perfect union, as they say. I would like to now bring up the chair of the Interfaith Banquet Committee, Brother Shoaib Qadri, to give his Interfaith Banquet Committee address. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the ISNA Interfaith Committee and your local host, the Council of Islamic Organizations of Greater Chicago, CIOGC, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you with the Islamic greeting, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May the peace, mercy, and blessings of the Almighty be upon all of us. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for being here today. Really appreciate you taking time off, especially on a long weekend, to be here. And as I look across the room, I see many familiar faces, friends from interfaith partnerships that we have developed, as well as elected officials that we have engaged with over the years. And as many of you may know, the Interfaith Banquet has always been a flagship event of the ISNA Convention for many years. And the reason for that is it is an opportunity for us to appreciate the friendships that we have developed with different faith communities, as to foster those relationships and to build new bonds. We are proud to host the ISNA Convention in Chicago again this year because Chicago has had a long tradition of interfaith engagement. As you know, the historic convention of the Parliament of World Religions was held here in 1893, the first of its kind, and the Parliament chose to come back to Chicago this year for their convention. And many of our interfaith partners who are here today, it was wonderful to be engaged with them at the Parliament as well. And as President Safa Zarzour just said, the Muslim community has been involved with interfaith work for many years at the national level with ISNA and at the local level with the Council, the CIOGC. And with that, I'd like to recognize the chair of CIOGC, Dr. Abdul Ghani Hamadeh, who's here, and the chair of the CIOGC Interfaith Committee, Zulfi Khan. Over the years, all of us from different faith communities have built better understanding by dispelling misconceptions, celebrating our common beliefs, and respecting each other's traditions. While we applaud our success, we need to recognize that there are challenges as well that we need to work on collectively. And again, I think Safa just alluded to that, especially challenges related to religious freedom and human rights. And it is no coincidence that the Parliament's theme for this year was defending freedom and human rights. Although the world has made steady progress over the past century in enhancing religious freedom, it is unfortunate to see that regress over the past few years, causing an alarming rise in polarization across the globe. And we know that a lot of it is perpetrated by geopolitical motives. However, we have a greater responsibility as faith leaders to work on that. While defending religious freedom, we need to recognize that it is not just the freedom to practice our religion, but the freedom to practice our faith without compromising on our values. This is a sentiment shared by various faith leaders over many conversations. And I want to take this opportunity to thank all our interfaith partners for your support over the years, and we look forward to our continued engagement. As you can see on the agenda, we have an excellent lineup of speakers. We recognize that our program was really long last year, and in our quest for continuous improvement, we decided to keep our program really short this year. And I want to do my part and keep my remarks short. With that, thank you again, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Brother Shoaib. Now I would like to bring up the Executive Director of the Shoulder to Shoulder campaign, which is part of ISNA, Ms. Nina Fernando. Thank you.
Greetings. It's an honor to be with you at ISNA's 60th annual convention and mark ISNA's influence on American Muslim life and more broadly ISNA's role in building a more pluralistic and inclusive United States of America. My name is Nina Fernando, and this evening we're celebrating these many contributions that ISNA has made in interfaith relations in America, and I'm personally grateful to be a part of that in a small way through my role as Executive Director at Shoulder to Shoulder Campaign, standing with American Muslims, advancing American ideals. I come from a Sri Lankan Catholic family, and together with my husband, who happens to be a United Church of Christ minister, we're raising our children, Ayan and Ashani, informed by our shared Christian roots. Ashani is actually here today with my mother, and I want to give a shout out to my mother who instilled strong values in me, and it's to love our neighbor, and it's why I do the work that I do at Shoulder to Shoulder. Yes. Shoulder to Shoulder was founded in 2010 during yet another post-9/11 horrible spike in anti-Muslim rhetoric in the public sphere. With thanks to the strong interfaith relationships ISNA built over the years, guided by leaders like Dr. Madsen, Dr. Saeed, Dr. El Sanusi, and so many others here at ISNA in this room today, please stand and be recognized if you would. Please stand if you would and be recognized. To all those that were there at our founding, please, there are many of you. Religious leadership at the time convened for what they called an emergency interfaith summit at the National Press Club. The leaders that day knew that it would take more than one press conference to solve anti-Muslim sentiment in the United States, and thus was the founding of the campaign. What sets Shoulder to Shoulder apart, among other efforts and organizations working to counter anti-Muslim sentiment, is that our coalition members and our target audience primarily consists of people of faith who are not Muslim, primarily Christian and Jewish leaders who are working shoulder to shoulder and are not directly impacted, but working shoulder to shoulder with those who are. We work with 37 national religious denominations and faith-based organizations, including groups like the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, the U.S. Catholic Conference of Bishops, the Union Reform for Judaism, and among others. And we work with over 70 local and regional community and congregational network members around the country. We have a small, and if I may say, a mighty crew of 4 women on our team. We have 7 executive committee members who serve as our board and primary decision makers of our campaign, one of whom is being honored here tonight as your keynote speaker, Catherine Laurie. ISNA, you have a true interfaith ally in her. And we have a distinguished group of consultative circle members who help guide our work and our organizational growth. Beyond this, we collaborate with many friends, partners, donors, supporters who take part in our programming every day, every week, every month. Shoulder to Shoulder's 3 pillars of work are to connect, to equip, to mobilize faith communities to counter and prevent anti-Muslim discrimination, hate, and violence in the United States, and build a society where all people, regardless of their faith or background, are treated with dignity. Here are some examples of our collaborative work. In years past, we hosted an emerging religious leaders seminar at ISNA conventions, bringing seminarians with little to no knowledge or experience of Islam and Muslims in America to learn about our work and their role in making change. Over time, that has evolved into workshops and longer trainings that we now call Faith Over Fear, to virtual and in-person programming on a variety of relevant topics, such as those that are shared here, working with young people, connecting them. We've mobilized through press conferences, pledges, advocacy, and faith statements, and our partners have done the same. Some example of our work connecting communities is through our annual Ramadan campaign, where we create a nationwide listing of iftars open to interfaith guests to highlight that Ramadan is an excellent opportunity to get to know your Muslim neighbors. We invite you all to add your interfaith iftars to this nationwide listing. In 2019, we went and visited some of those iftars on a Ramadan road trip to tell stories. In 2019, we connected households virtually during Ramadan to connect. This is just a small glimpse of our work in action, bridging communities, equipping leaders with the tools and resources they need, and doing our small part in building a pluralistic nation. As I conclude my sharing, I want to note that in the lead up to Shoulder's 10th anniversary, our executive leadership made the wise decision to change the latter part of our tagline from upholding American values to advancing American ideals, because we acknowledge that the founding of this nation was imperfect, that racism, violence, and exclusion is a part of our history, and we wanted to convey that our work is aspirational, that we have not yet reached our goal. The theme of this year's convention is 60 years of service, navigating a way forward. ISNA has made many notable and profound contributions over the years, but your work is not done. We will find a way forward, acknowledging that we are still working toward building a multi-faith, multiracial, multicultural democracy, and that we must apply our shared values of respect and fairness and dignity to each and every person, regardless of their faith. We need you, ISNA, as an active participant going forward, and we can and will get there through our continued work together, shoulder to shoulder. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Now I would like to bring up a very special moment for this evening. I would like to bring up Brother President Safa Zarzour and Executive Director Bashar Salim to give the Interfaith Leader Award of this year, and they will announce its winner. Thank you.
As Nina mentioned, that truly, I mean, we have so many, especially here in the audience, so many allies, so many friends that we really value and honor. But I can tell you that Catherine, Lowry have stood out for us, and the efforts you have done in many areas, not only with Shoulder to Shoulder, have really made it an easy choice for us this year to honor her. And I would like to read the award that she will be presented. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. This award is presented to Catherine Lowry in recognition of your outstanding contributions and support for justice, fairness, interreligious harmony, pluralism, and combating anti-Muslim bigotry, presented by the Islamic Society of North America at the 60th Annual Convention, Rosemont, Illinois, September 3rd, 2023.
Wa assalamu alaikum. I'm so moved. Thank you. Greetings, dear ones. in the name of the God of many names. It is such a joy to be here, and the most appropriate thing for me to start with is not only thank you for this honor, but thank you for the invitation to celebrate this milestone with you. It is truly remarkable. I greet you also on behalf of Presiding Bishop Elizabeth Eaton of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, who you honored in 2017 on the 500th anniversary of the Reformation. And I have just handed to President Zazur an envelope containing her congratulatory letter to ISNA, but I will just read one paragraph of it to you because it really resonates with how you introduced this evening. She writes, "From the beginning, ISNA has embodied the very best of American democracy, including our religious diversity. Thanks to visionary people, especially Dr. Saeed Said, you who are ISNA have invited us and other interfaith partners to stand shoulder to shoulder to counteract the crises of our time, including the rise of anti-Muslim hatred. It is because of ISNA's initiative and the leadership of Dr. Said and his legacy bearers that the interfaith movement in the US is the force for common good that it is today. As you continue to navigate the way forward, I encourage you to hold fast to your credibility as a leader of the interfaith movement. ISNA's interfaith leadership is a charism that serves the Muslim community, your interfaith family, and the whole of God's creation crying out for justice and peace." I don't know if the slides, are the slides available? Arshan? Thank you. The first time I heard about ISNA was nearly 25 years ago, as I began my studies at Harvard Divinity School and my work with the Pluralism Project, which is Diana Eck's research project on the changing religious landscape in the United States. In those days, when organizational websites were still a novelty, our work was to research, publish, and update profiles of religious organizations, leaders, and movements that were growing as a result of the 1965 Immigration and Nationalities Act. I read countless interviews, documents, field reports, news articles, and issues of Islamic Horizons, tracing the unfolding history of ISNA. I pored over files of photos and field notes documenting the construction of the headquarters in Plainfield, write-ups about Dr. Said's critical role in the founding of ISNA and later work to launch the Office of Interfaith and Community Alliances, and newspaper clippings about the historic election of Dr. Ingrid Mattson. Eventually, my research came off the page. It wasn't long before I had opportunities to meet in person and work with the amazing leadership and people of ISNA. This began, of course, while I was still at the Pluralism Project, including the decade plus that I served as assistant director, but then also in subsequent years when I served as president of the National Council of Churches and in my current role with the ELCA and by extension the Shoulder to Shoulder campaign. Over the course of time, I have come to know you, dear ISNA, but also to love you. In Scripture, we are commanded to love our neighbors as ourselves, but it's impossible to love each other without knowing and embracing each other. It was always clear to me that my work at the Pluralism Project was to make slow and steady contributions as part of a religiously diverse network of people committed to writing a richer story of us, of we the people. But then, on the first day of my second year of divinity school, I was standing in the registration line on a perfect fall day. One of the admissions staff hurriedly rolled in a media cart and turned on the television in time for us to watch the second plane hit the Twin Towers. The first people who came to mind were my Muslim friends, my Muslim colleagues, and as the pundits began to spin, I became cognizant of the terror that would be inflicted upon Muslims and those who were assumed to be Muslim. And it was through that profound experience of empathy and also outrage that I realized that our work was not only slow and steady, but also urgent and existential. The narrative of we that we were so carefully constructing at the Pluralism Project was getting buried under the crushing weight of bigotry, hatred, vengeance, and violence, funded by $1 billion industry and fueled by America's sin, original sin of racism. We were no longer researchers only, but first responders. It was 10 years later that I began my work as president of the NCC and in the office of the presiding bishop of the ELCA. I arrived in the direct tailwinds of the press conference that was just described that launched Shoulder to Shoulder. And despite the remarkable bridge-building efforts of a rapidly growing interfaith movement in the years since 9/11, anti-Muslim hatred was continuing to spread like cancer. Of course, my own position had changed from research to religious leadership. I was grateful to step directly into the genius of others, many in this room who recognized that solidarity was the only way forward. Jews and Christians, as we heard, many of whom had faced their own history of religious bigotry, coming together to defend and protect Muslims against extremism. That campaign continues to be as urgent as ever, and I am so inspired and grateful for the leadership of Nina and our staff colleagues. Thank you, Nina. But what also of the bigotry within my own tradition? Going back to the ugly tropes Martin Luther used as the Turks were advancing across Europe, and forward to present day, as many Lutherans harbor our society's stereotypes against Muslims. There is much to be said about the decades of work to resource, educate, and equip our church to know and love our Muslim neighbors. And I am so grateful that right beneath me here is Professor Mark Swanson, who chairs the ELCA's consultative panel on Lutheran-Muslim relations, the body that spearheads these initiatives, and in strong partnership with the Center for Christian-Muslim Engagement at the Lutheran School of Theology at Chicago, directed by Sarah Trum, who's also here tonight. In 2021, the ELCA adopted a declaration to the Muslim community, assuring our Muslim neighbors of our love and respect and reaffirming our commitment to work together, unpacking our theological, historical, and dialogical journey that has brought us to this place. And while this declaration of ours is addressed to you, our Muslim extended family, it also speaks an important word back to us, to the church. It's a reminder to us that our theological inheritance and the commitments stemming from it are not the final word. It asserts that we in the ELCA seek friendship and solidarity with our Muslim neighbors, not in spite of our Lutheran commitments, but because of them, and that we have learned from you, in fact, the gift of dialogue. And while a declaration can't by itself move mountains, it can provide a measure of accountability to you. Building a mature commitment to dialogue, solidarity, and love is something we cannot take up without you. But even more importantly, as I said, it's something we learned from you. And over time, we have built authentic ties with you so that our declaration is not simply shouted out into the ether, but received as our word to you, our Muslim neighbors and friends. So 25 years after my initial introduction to ISNA, I remain absolutely convinced of the value of our dual task, to carry both the slow and steady work of coming to get to know one another and to carry out the pressing work of enacting social change. Today, we're facing multiple crises that demand our common action, as you said. The continuous rise in anti-Muslim hate, the simultaneous rise of anti-Semitism, the pandemic of anti-Black, anti-Asian, and other forms of racism and white supremacy, the embrace of white Christian nationalism, the rise of other forms of religious nationalism globally, including the Hindutva in India, and in Israel-Palestine, where the Palestinian people are facing dire repression, violence, and desecration of their holy sites. We also have several public health crises, including, of course, the ongoing pandemic of COVID-19, the scourge of gender-based violence, mass shootings. In fact, by the end of July in the US, we had surpassed 400 mass shootings. The discrimination, violence, and repressive policies faced by LGBTQIA+ people, including the current wave of anti-trans legislation, the global refugee and migrant crisis, the allure of totalitarianism, and of course, the climate crisis that poses the greatest threat. None of this can wait. The greatest challenges of our time require our collective wisdom, our cooperation, but most importantly, our common hope for us, for our children, and for all of the creation. My husband, Tim, who is here tonight, and I have 4 amazing children. They're coming of age with an awareness that I never had at their age. This includes their understanding that diversity, including religious diversity, is not simply a given, but a God-given gift. It includes their experience also, however, of how this world is hell-bent on squelching that gift, of creating rifts that divide us into them. So we are teaching them, and they are teaching us too. But our hope is not only vested in our youth. It is in the possibility and the opportunity we have for an intergenerational revolution, one in which we say yes to the both ands before us, of seeking mutual understanding and cooperation for the common good, of engaging in dialogue and common action, of working within and across our traditions, of declaring and doing, and most of all, seeing the seemingly immovable challenges before us and clinging to hope for what can be. Not by our efforts, but by God's grace alone. And so this, I think, is how the next 60 years before us can carry forward the grand interfaith legacy that you as ISNA have extended to us, your partners. You see, it was never simply about mapping changing demographics or documenting or anything else. It was always about mapping onto our hearts and minds the possibility of we that will carry us forward into God's designs for justice, peace, and unity for all people on the planet. Congratulations, ISNA, on 60 impactful years. We are here tonight as co-celebrants of this remarkable milestone, and tomorrow we are ready to continue as your co-workers within God's good creation. Thanks be to God.
Now I have the special honor of inviting Special Advisor Sarah Minkara onto the stage. Sarah Minkara is a dear friend, and I feel deeply honored to have her here. And she's gone on to do great things in the world. And so President Biden appointed Sarah Minkara as a Special Advisor on International Disability Rights. In this role, Special Advisor Minkara leads the U.S. Department of State's comprehensive strategy to promote and protect the rights of persons with disabilities internationally. So I'm really happy Special Advisor Sarah Minkara is here. Thank you.
Hey, assalamu alaikum. How's everyone doing? Good? Can everyone just snap for me? So I just hear how many people? Okay, great, amazing. Arshan, it's so great. Thank you for your kind words. It's beautiful to be with you all today. A huge thank to Hana Nasri, my colleague and my partner in crime who walked me up here and traveled with me. So I'm gonna make this interactive. We'll see how I can do this. I like to do the work together. So just get yourself ready, because I'm gonna ask you questions. I'm going to try to keep it within 15 minutes. Just, guys, give me a 2-minute warning if I'm coming to my 15-minute timeline, okay? I'm going to first introduce myself in a different way because it's going to connect to what I'm going to say. I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a friend, I'm a colleague, I'm a neighbor. I'm an introvert, I'm a traveler, I'm a troublemaker. I love math, I love nature, I love mystery thriller audiobooks. My favorite color is green. Yes, I used to be able to see. If you ever want to make me happy, feed me chicken. I drink too much coffee. I'm a woman, I'm Muslim, I am blind, I'm a person with a disability, and I'm very, very proud of it. Why did I introduce myself this way? And just shout out your thoughts, don't raise your hand, I'm blind, remember. So, why did I introduce myself this way? More than one thing. What else? Person first. I'm proud of myself, definitely. What else? Just like us, and then what did you say? Authentic. More than my disability. Couple more. Oh, thank you. I'll take that. What else? Connect with me. Yes. I'm able. Oh, thank you. Brilliant. I'll take that too. So I introduced myself in this way for a couple reasons. One, we're all individuals comprised of both visible and invisible identities, right? Right? I mentioned some things that you cannot see. I love math. People are like, oh, really? Well, yeah, I majored in math. Math is a big part of actually my passion. There's so many things we are that are invisible, and so many things that are visible. And I ended by saying I'm a person with a disability, and I'm very, very proud of it. It's a big part of my identity. But we as humans all across the world share one common thing. That is the desire to be seen, to be heard, and to be valued, right? We all share that. But let's be real. When it comes to the disability community, the 1.3 billion individuals in this world with a disability, most of us are not seen, we're not heard, and we're not valued. That's the reality. Why is that the reality? Let me ask you my second question. If society sees a person with a visible, and I'm saying the word visible disability here very intentionally, because some of us have invisible disabilities, right? But if society sees a person with a white cane, let's say, a blind person walking down the street, what comes to society's mind? Just shout it out. What comes to society's mind? God, it's not me. What else? Poor thing. What else? They need help. What else? They're so brave. Definitely. What else? Marginal. What else? How can I help you? What else? There are people like us. What else? Sad? Is that what you said? Yeah, sad, definitely. What else? Where's I like that. Where's your sighted dog? Yeah. What else? There's two common narratives, which a lot of you mentioned here. Two common extreme narrative. One narrative is the pity narrative. I feel bad for you. You're less than. You're incapable. You need help. I'm glad it's not me. Oh my God, how do you live? You're suffering. You're struggling. You're incapable. You're an add-on. You're a burden. That's very common, right? That's one extreme narrative. The other extreme narrative, as we call it in the disability world, inspiration porn. Oh my God, you're so amazing. Oh my God, you're so brave. You're so courageous. Why? Because I'm just walking? Shouldn't that be the reality? We are not yet at a point in society anywhere in the world where we expect people with disabilities to be out and about, going to schools, having jobs, having family. We have not yet normalized the identity of disability. We have not yet. You know, when you see a couple, a married couple, one with a disability, one without a disability, what do people think? The person with a disability, oh my God, you feel so grateful, right? And the person without a disability, you're such an angel. What does that mean? We're still seeing disability from a point of less than. So then what does society do? Society goes around and says, well, let's come up with different words. Differently able. Excuse me, what does that even mean? Are we all differently abled? Special needs. Well, I can tell sighted people, well, you have special needs. You need light. I don't need light. Persons with determination. Well, what if I don't want to be determined? Let's just be real. I'm a person with a disability. I cannot see. Don't change that about me. Accept it. But change how you look at my disability. That's what I want you to do. change how you look at my disability. We need to get to a point in society where we see a disability as an identity of value. So I have had the honor to be appointed by President Biden to be the U.S. Special Advisor on International Disability Rights, where we lead with my amazing team, Disability Foreign Policy, to advance the rights of persons with disability across the globe. What does that mean? We do it through a very important lens, the value-based lens. And there's two layers to that. The first layer is that, let's be real, and I use that phrase a lot if you can realize that, let's be real. If you're not including the 16% of the world's population into our economy and society and systems, what does that mean? We're losing out on what they can contribute. We as society are losing out. You know, our GDP is impacted by 7% when we don't include persons with disabilities into our economy. I think it's more than that, but let's take the 7%, sure. But that's huge. You know, we as persons with disability have $2 trillion in disposable income. $2 trillion. I think it's more than that. Let's take that $2 trillion. We're losing out if you don't include us. Include us because it benefits you and benefits us. The second layer to that is when we make a system accessible for persons with disability, it benefits everyone. I was a math major in college, and classmates will always come to me and say, Sada, what classes are you taking next semester? I'd be like, oh, what does that matter? I'm like, Sada, whenever you're in the classroom, the professor becomes a better teacher. Why? Because he or she had to explain better what was on the board in a better way, because I can't see. Who benefited? Everyone. Accessibility and universal design benefits everyone. It's not a favor, it's not an add-on, it's not a special accommodation. It creates more ways of navigating this world where everyone benefits. You know, text messages came from the need of persons who are hard of hearing and deaf. Who uses text messages? Everyone. So let's get over accessibility as a special thing. So we have 4 main priorities in our office. The first is fostering accountability and building capacity. We benefit here in the US from the ADA, where because of the ADA, I was able to go to my public school system. We still have a lot of work to do, but we have policies and legislations that allow us to be in this society and included. Across the globe, most countries have ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which is based on the ADA. Great, they ratified it. Where's the gap? Implementation. So we work with countries and government to help them build their capacity through implementing their policies by providing technical expertise from across different agencies, whether it's Department of Education or Department of Labor, to really help them build their capacity implementing these policies. We've been to 25 countries so far in doing this. The second is inclusive democracy, which is an important priority for the US government. And as we travel the world, disability inclusive democracy is so important because, do you guys know this? A lot of persons with disabilities in certain countries don't even have the right to vote because of their disability. Let's create access and break down those barriers for voting, but that should be the bare minimum. Let's get to a point where persons with disabilities are politically participating and running for office across the globe. We need more of that. The third priority is crisis. As Catherine mentioned, we're always facing crisis, whether it's climate crisis, look at Pakistan, whether it's the Turkey earthquake, whether it's a conflict like Ukraine. When a crisis is hit, who's left behind? Persons with disability. Let's make sure in emergency planning and responding to a crisis, in recovery and reconstruction, in peace building and negotiation, persons with disabilities are at the table, not because it's just the right thing to do, but because it benefits everyone. We recently were with the Secretary of State in London at the Ukraine Recovery Conference, making sure when we're talking about recovery, accessibility is at the table, because if not, it's a missed opportunity. And the last priority is narrative change. Policies and legislations are important, but who implements policies? Society. We still have a lot of work in changing the narrative on disability. And we do this through a lot of different spaces, whether it's the G7, G20, ASEAN, APEC, etc. APEC, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. But then also we do it through different sectors like the faith-based community. In our travels, like when we went to Egypt, we met with Azhar, and we met also with the Coptic Christian bishops to talk about narrative change. When we were in Nigeria, we met at the ambassador's home with religious leaders from both the Muslim and Christian community. And we say it's so important for the faith-based communities to understand that it is a community that can really make a difference for persons with disability. We are not a charity. We are not vulnerable. Include us because it benefits the community. People will tell me, well, Sarah, we don't have persons with disabilities coming to and accessing our spaces. Well, of course, if it's not accessible, they're not going to come. If we don't have sign language interpretation, they're not going to come. If we don't have an accessible physical infrastructure, they're not going to come. If the space is, the narrative is a charity, we're not going to come. We need to start breaking down those barriers and creating a space of inclusivity and accessibility because it's going to benefit everyone. I'm going to end with 3 things of what we can all be doing. 1, we need to continue having difficult conversation around narrative. We will never be able to address this if we don't really be able to create that space to create that to have those difficult conversations. 2, we need to have shared responsibility. Disability should be part of every single one of our work. It touches everyone. And to be honest, we are the most inclusive community. All of you might be temporarily abled someday, as we get older. Disability is an inclusive community. But it's a community that touches everyone because, as I mentioned, when you don't include disability, we're losing out that value. 3rd, building capacity. Let me end with a really important phrase. There's a phrase in the disability world, nothing about us without us, right? I say let's take it a step further. Nothing without us. When you include us, it will benefit everyone. Thank you so much. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Sarah.
Gentlemen, can we give this fine lady a standing round of applause?
Thank you, Sarah. Wow. What Sarah said to me, it is not the eyes that see, it's the heart. It's a wonderful reminder. Now I'd like to bring up one of the stalwarts of the Muslim American community and the Islamic Society of North America, Dr. Ingrid Mattson, to give our final keynote address for the night. Dr. Ingrid Mattson is the past president of the Islamic Society of North America. Dr. Ingrid Mattson is the chair in Islamic Studies at Huron University College at the Western University in Canada. Dr. Mattson is a senior fellow of the Royal Al-Bayt Institute for Islamic Thought in Amman, Jordan, and was a member of the Interfaith Task Force of the White House of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships during the presidency of Barack Obama. Thank you.
All right. Everyone's papers are here. Whoa, those are bright lights. Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, this has been a great program so far, mashallah. It's really good to be back here to see everyone. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So I, like ISNA, turned 60 this year, actually last week. I think that big cake was for me. And it's a time I've been really going back and reflecting, hopefully not in a grim or depressive way, but in a constructive way, just thinking about where we've come with our interfaith work, the kind of challenges we're facing now. And I spent a lot of time this summer working on a paper that is entitled Interfaith Dialogue as it impinges upon the public square. I'm going to draw from that paper a few things today because I'm very concerned that our interfaith work and engagement should be ethical, it should be reciprocal, it should not be instrumental. I mean, we've been talking a lot about shoulder to shoulder and how much the Muslim community has benefited And of course, we're not about just taking, but really about engaging this work on a principled platform, and whatever we love for ourselves, as the Prophet Muhammad said, we should love for our brothers and sisters in humanity. So I want to talk a little bit, I'm going to read a little bit just because it's a lot faster, and I know we're limited in time, and they said we're going to be shorter this year than last year. I guess you had 13 speakers last year. So I'm not going to be too worried, but definitely I know that people are waiting to serve dinner at 6:30, so we'll try to get as close to that as possible. So to begin, the concept of the public square is linked to a number of different historical precedents, including the town square, the green, or the commons. Often these physical spaces are ideally presented as venues where in the past citizens could freely gather and express or exchange views, as well as preserve and maintain common resources. Yet these spaces could also be venues for the performance of state power and violence against marginalized people, where exemplary corporal punishments and rituals of anathemization were performed. Power dynamics are present wherever people gather, and the public square is no exception. Jürgen Habermas argued that the appearance in Europe of more open public venues, including city streets, as well as coffee shops and salons, enabled the emergence of a bourgeois public sphere in a number of 18th century societies. In this sphere, state power could be monitored, discussed, and critiqued in an open and accessible manner, and thus was important for the establishment and maintenance of democracy. The proliferation of newspapers and other print media, which accompanied the general rise in literacy, opened more space where issues of common concern could be freely discussed. Habermas argued that these vital public spheres were damaged, even destroyed later, when people's attention was largely diverted from issues of common concern and political power to material consumption through the influence of advertising. Along with consumerism, the expansion of capitalism created greater inequality among the bourgeois, and the wealthy were able to seize significant control of public venues, making them less accessible to those with less wealth. Now, Habermas has been critiqued by many for presenting an unrealistic version of the bourgeois public sphere because these spaces almost always excluded women and many other groups of people. Marianne Franks, writing in the Yale Law Journal, says the public square has historically tended to reinforce legal and social hierarchies of race, gender, class, and ability, rather than foster radically democratic and inclusive dialogue. In the United States in particular, the public square has frequently served as the site for the assertion of violent white male supremacy. Nevertheless, the dynamic that Habermas described, whereby community members seek to create open and accessible spaces or squares where they can share concerns, discover common interests, and critique state policies, only to have those spaces disrupted by those with greater wealth and power is an ongoing reality until today. In fact, I would say it's exacerbated today. Community members are enticed away from prioritizing issues of common concern by relentless commercial appeals to their individual or private interests. Further, spaces are appropriated by those appropriated, in other words, taken over, by those activated not by concern for the public good or for a reciprocal ethic of engagement, but by a desire to justify and display their wealth or their power, or both. 20 years ago, many believed that the internet or digital spaces had great potential as new, open, and accessible public squares. Now, many are convinced that the cycle of disruption and appropriation by commercial and authoritarian forces has spoiled the potential. Others point out that the internet never truly met the criteria for a public square. Franks says, "It is certainly true that people gather on social media, but beyond that, the analogy to a physical public square is strained. The dominant social media platforms, including Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, are privately owned, operated for profit, and virtual. Despite marketing rhetoric that emphasizes inclusion, community, and communication, these platforms are designed to serve corporate, not public interests. Like every public square, social media spaces are designed, and if we do not want to continually be subject to oppressively designed or appropriated spaces, we first have to notice this reality about those spaces which already exist, and then develop, critically assess, and continually redesign those spaces we consider public. Frank urges us to move beyond the public square so that we can imagine a multitude of spaces designed for reflection instead of performativity, meaning whoever's the most charismatic, flashy, dynamic speaker, right? The attractive person who attracts the camera and the lights. Accessibility instead of exclusion, and intellectual curiosity, humility and empathy instead of ignorance, arrogance, and cruelty. My own experience of interfaith dialogue and its relationship to the public square is a journey from a state of relative naivete to an understanding that one must continually assess the power dynamics underlying and activating these spaces. Now, in the paper I go on, I talk about 9/11 and its aftermath, the change that we saw. We all know that here, so let me move on. When I arrived in 1998 to teach at Hartford Seminary, a historically Christian seminary, it had already moved 3 decades earlier from a missionary and misinformation approach to Islam to one of shared learning and mutual respect. Because the seminary was particularly focused on practical theology and the preparation of students for congregational and pastoral leadership, learning how to engage in interfaith dialogue with respect and integrity was an important aspect of the curriculum. Further, because this seminary had a strong social justice focus, learning how to strengthen those interfaith relationships through allyship for justice and vice versa was emphasized and put into practice. This outlook and pedagogical focus at my institution was not unique, but was part of a cultural shift in liberally minded American institutions or in some of their departments, as well as in pastoral care training programs. This allowed Muslim Americans to begin to acquire the academic degrees and pastoral skills held by religious professionals from other faith communities. Fair or not, interfaith higher co-education served as a means of vetting Muslims for serving in public and service institutions. Chaplaincy heads in the military and corrections departments, where religious practices were being accommodated in a place with close proximity to violence, were explicit about this. Muslims were not particularly trusted to vet their own chaplains, and chaplains educated exclusively in Muslim circles were vulnerable to ideological attacks. And we know about some of those. Now, in the wake of Islamophobia and everything that happened, ordinary Muslims, as you know, Muslim leaders, Muslim-led organizations, regularly issued press releases, condemnations of the terrorists, clarifications about the distinction between terrorists and lawfully conducted warfare, but these assurances often fell on deaf ears. I and many of my colleagues who had years of experience giving public presentations, noticed a drastic shift among the people who came to our programs. Inevitably, now the first question asked was, why don't Muslims denounce terrorism? Despite the fact that such denunciations were everywhere, the message was not coming through. Now, some years later, the Center for American Progress analyzed the rise of Islamophobia in America in the first decade after 9/11. They found that it could be attributed to, quote, a tight network of anti-Muslim, anti-Islam foundations, misinformation experts, validators, grassroots organizations, religious right groups, and their allies in the media and in politics. In other words, misinformation originated with a small, well-organized group of people who had an effective strategy: release and amplify inflammatory misinformation about Islam and Muslims, and it will catch on, especially given the potency of internet virality by this point. This helps explain why formerly general audiences who were mostly uninformed or somewhat misinformed about Islam were now often closed to expert or even neighborly explanations of mainstream Muslim beliefs. They were inoculated with misinformation. In the terminology of Islamic epistemology, they had moved from simple ignorance, jahl basit, to complex ignorance, jahl murakkab. And as we've all learned from the COVID-19 pandemic, facts and expert opinion cannot necessarily counter misinformation. Indeed, sometimes being confronted with a contrary view motivates people to search for more information to support their misbeliefs, and hence they go down a deeper and deeper and deeper rabbit hole of misinformation. The problem of misinformation in society is not simply about incorrect information or incorrect thinking, if we can separate for one moment thinking from emotion. Researcher Chris Bale, who some of you, I'm sure you've read his work at University of North Carolina, who would later analyze media from this time period, would conclude that the messages of anti-Muslim fringe groups and figures received disproportionate attention from the media because they displayed strong emotion, especially anger. And their outrageous statements made for exciting viewing. Just shift that to exciting listening, the podcast today, right? This is all another cycle. So because of this, the kind of person, even though there were a few, the kind of people who had extreme messages, extreme Islamophobic messages, they appeared so frequently in the media. They were, people loved to listen to them, to hear them. But that frequency of the message repeating began to make them appear mainstream. Chris Bale says, and I want us to think about this because it is so important for the challenge we face today. The September 11th attacks created profound upheaval among the community of civil society organizations struggling to shape shared understandings of Islam in the American media. Though the vast majority of civil society organizations produced pro-Muslim messages, journalists were captivated by a small group of anti-Muslim fringe organizations. These organizations represented only a tiny fraction of all civil society organizations within the cultural environment, but accounted for nearly half of those that exerted any influence upon U.S. media representations of Islam between 2001 and 2003. This discovery calls for a critical reappraisal of the concept of resonance, or the notion that civil society organizations create cultural change by producing mainstream messages that are consistent with prevailing cultural themes. Instead, this research shows that social psychological processes interact with the cultural environment in the wake of major crises. namely displays of negative emotion, enable fringe organizations to transcend their obscurity and humble resources by appealing to the media's legendary appetite for drama and our own hunger for drama. But media amplification of emotional fringe organizations also creates a distorted representation of the cultural environment more broadly. Put differently, the disproportionate influence of emotional fringe organizations creates the misperception that such groups, in fact, are mainstream. Now, of course, this put not only Muslims in an impossible situation, but any group that is stereotyped as angry, angry women, angry black women, angry, why do those people shout, right? It puts us in an impossible situation, because if the stereotype is these people are angry, then how are we to be the ones to display the sufficient negative anger and emotion to capture people's attention? And this is where actually support from allies becomes very, very important. And I go on in my paper to talk about some other initiatives that we had, and then focus on some of the most, what I think are the most principled initiatives. And one I want to mention here, I'll get to it, 5 minutes. Okay, I know I'm 5 minutes over, but just going to take advantage of the podium, which I usually don't, but I will today. So this is the National Religious Campaign Against Torture. Raise your hand if you know about the National Religious Campaign Against Torture. Wow, not enough people. Oh boy. So the National Religious Campaign Against Torture is the most successful interfaith or multi-religious organization in America. It was through the advocacy of NEARCAT and really brilliant advocacy, but also research and faithful engagement that led to President Obama on his first day in office signing an executive order against torture. And there are a few things that were done by NEARCAT that I think are particularly important that we should think about if we want to have a principled interfaith engagement, and especially on the difficult issues that we're talking about today. So NEARCAT was principled and effective for a number of reasons. First, each faith community was invited to reflect upon human dignity and its implications for policy from their own perspective. So from their own theological and religious and scriptural perspective. This means people were grounding their objections with it from a place of deep faith and commitment. Second, NEARCAT welcomed people from all faith communities, not just Abrahamic communities. Over 300 different organizations are members of NEARCAT. Third, NEARCAT does not designate one religious organization or representative of that faith, but accepts the members according to their own self-definition. In other words, there's not one Hindu organization, one Sikh organization, one Muslim organization. So current Muslim organizations, for example, include the National Political Advocacy Organization, the Muslim Public Affairs Council, a local service organization called Al-Nefa, Muslim Women's Cooperative and Development, the religiously and socially conservative Islamic Circle of North America, which I want to say, and this is just the point for today, one of the points, which according to their website, which I checked out recently, engages in outreach to ensure that parents can opt out of mandated student instruction and lessons and storybooks on LGBTQ themes. Who else is a member? Muslims for Progressive Values, an organization which, among other things, is, quote, committed to ending discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. So what this shows is that NEARCAT does not, to be inclusive, does not require that all groups agree on every issue, but they do accept people to come together on one issue. Yet, at the same time, if people are going to commit to being in a community an engaged community on one issue, then certainly at least they will have a relationship and should be open to listening to other points of views that conflict with their own on other issues. I mean, otherwise we cannot set the table and demand that everyone come and only talk about what we want. Finally, NEARCAT does not restrict membership to congregationally based faith-based organizations. They do not prioritize clergy as leaders or spokespersons, which is, I think, particularly important from my perspective, coming from a religious community that does not have ordination, but that has increasingly been pushed into the model of congregational religious identity, and the word cleric is increasingly used to characterize imams of mosques. Please don't do that, okay? We have religious leaders who are not only imams of mosques, but chaplains. We have scholars, male and female, and more than anything, and this is the final thing I want to say about interfaith work in the American Muslim community was grounded and founded and activated primarily by ordinary Muslims in their local neighborhoods, mostly women, reaching out to their neighbors, sharing good work in soup kitchens or, anything that was good and having conversations. I do not want all of that work, that foundation and that energy and that insight to be marginalized for the sake of certain people who are now being designated as clergy, the clergy of Islam. Our interfaith partners, please don't contribute to the marginalization of the people in our community who are capable of contributing. And we have to do the same thing with you as well. That's part of the reciprocity of this and what we should keep in mind. I hope, God willing, as we go forward in the future. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
We're just a little over time, but if you bear with me, we just have one more thing to do, and we'll wrap up in the next 5 minutes and have dinner together. I would like to, in the words of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, what is time, right? I would now like to invite Ms. Kathy from Al-Qaeda, Iowa. And Al-Qaeda Award is a partnership between ISNA. Initiative is a partnership between ISNA and Al-Qaeda Initiative. And it is a partnership that we're engaging in for the next few years. And we're really happy to have Ms. Kathy here with us from Al-Qaeda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here and help celebrate the 60 years of ISNA. But relax, because I'm cutting my talk halfway, okay? It'll just be a couple of minutes here. Because my partner, John Kaiser, couldn't be here, and he and I have been telling the Abdul Qadir story since 2008. Now, these are his remarks, and he feels very badly that he couldn't be here. On behalf of my colleague, AEP co-founder, author, and dear friend, John Kaiser, I'm honored to share his remarks titled, Algeria, USA, and Abdul Qadir and the World Today. So what is missing? Well, and these are his words, I will begin by answering a common question. Why and how did agnostic John Kaiser become so interested in Emir Abdul Qadir? This is an affair that I have been having since 2002. The answer is simple. I fell in love with the Emir's spiritual inclusiveness and humility. And priorities, well, that is knowledge needed for living together in community. So here's a passage from Emir Abdul Qadir's spiritual writings, and it says, if you think God is what the different communities believe, Muslims, Christians, Jews, Zoroastrians, I have a hard time with this word, polytheism, okay, and other, well, he is that but more. None of his creatures worships him in his entirety. No one is an infidel in all ways relating to God. Each of his creatures worships him and knows him in a certain way and is ignorant of him in others. Error does not exist in this world except in a relative manner. He said, I received this statement on a scrap of paper brought to me eagerly by a Benedictine sister living in the Centre Culturel Glycines in Algiers, as I was finishing research for the publication of the Monks of Tiberine, Faith, Love, and Terror in Algeria. She had been told that I was the strange American tourist interested in learning about Emir Abdul Qadir, who had won the respect of many of his French opponents. Thanks to this unexpected gift, the Emir removed all the certitudes that had made me allergic to religion, especially when it is transformed into religious nationalism. Abdul Qadir is rational, humble, and inclusive in one stroke. Rational because he recognizes that God is infinitely bigger than any religion can imagine. Humble because the finite can't own the infinite. And inclusive because we all are wrong if we think earthlings can grasp the higher power. Yes, God is greater than religion. On that day, Abdul Qadir shot an arrow into my heart. And yes, God understands marketing. Different times, different cultures, different locations, each require different approaches. If McDonald's understands the simple truth for its flock, certainly God must. I just have a couple things. Okay, now I had prepared some things to say because I want to let you know about the Abdul Qadir Education Project. We are international, and we are centered in my town of El Kader, which is named after Emir Abdul Qadir, the only town in the United States named after a Muslim. So, and I'm not going to do this all because everybody's hungry, and I know you've had a lot of speakers, but I would like you to reach out to me to ask for more, and I will tell our story wherever possible. So please keep me in mind if you need a speaker. And we have other people with us as well. I'm going to share one quote because it's by a very famous person. She just received an award tonight, Catherine Laurie. This quote of hers was from a few years ago. I gave my PowerPoint to our Northeast Iowa ELCA Synod bishop, and he liked it, and he took it to her. She liked it, and so I called her and asked if she could give me a quote. Famous people, quotes, always good. So this is what she said about our project. Congratulations, Catherine, also. So she said, the Abdul Qadir Education Project provides opportunities for people across the globe to engage in the important and urgent work of building civility, enhancing cultural and religious literacy, and fostering mutual understanding among peoples. In a deeply divided world, the witness of Emir Abdul Qadir, who was a bridge builder, is exemplary. All of us can learn from reflecting on the history of his life and the ongoing relevance of his legacy. Therefore, the ELCA's Interreligious Relations encourages students to participate in the essay contest. And I'm developing the contest this year. It hasn't been fully defined, and I would like suggestions for that if anybody is willing. Now, here's another important thing. Essay winner Brandon stated, Abdul Qadir's legacy provides a useful model for how global relationships might be rethought and restructured to better suit us all. AEP offers students a chance to engage with a narrative of history not often discussed in Western classrooms, yet crucial to develop a comprehension of the variegated ways the West intersects with the East and vice versa. Now, we put Daoud Shad, his heritage is from Pakistan, graduated Yale, and he's at MIT today, so he is now on our board. When he wrote his essay, he said, reflecting on Emir Abdul Qadir reminds me that one must always seek opportunities for spiritual growth and service to others. Oh, I will close with Abdul Qadir's words. The form of worship may change, but not the master, for the God of the Christians is also ours. We are only different in the way we address ourselves to him. I want to thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Kathy. I would like to acknowledge a few organizations and the different public representatives that are here, and especially would like to acknowledge Mohsen Initiative, which is a Muslim organization dedicated to disabilities in the Muslim community and throughout the communities. And so I would love to acknowledge them and the public leaders that are here, and thank you all for coming out this evening. We hope that you have enjoyed this program, and we hope that you will return next year. And this year will bring fruit to deeper religious harmony, community, and interaction. We are thankful for our partnership with you, and we hope that we can continue to work together to establish conscientious communities that help foster a better community and nation for all, and that we can strive together towards that hopeful, perfect union. Thank you again, and may God's peace and mercy be with you, and hope you enjoy your dinner and the rest of the evening. And I conclude the evening by leaving you with the words of Bob Dylan. Fare thee well, my darling friend. I'm leaving in the first hour of the morning. I'm bound for the Bay of Mexico, or maybe the coast of California. So it's fare thee well, my own true love. We'll meet another day, another time. It ain't the leaving that's grieving me, but my true love who's bound to stay behind. Thank you.
The 60th Annual ISNA Convention. 60 years of service, navigating the way forward.